All right, it's great to be here, guys. A little nervous to be in front of y'all tonight, surprisingly. I can talk to the governor's staff, I can talk to executive leadership from across the state or country, but talking to former fellow students like yourself and people like I was in your shoes certainly makes me feel good. I see some familiar faces here I've seen over the time. It's good to see you here, bud. Glad you're at the very front.
Yeah.
I got some interns that I tend to not try to haze too much, but let them know they feel welcomed at the Division of Emergency Management, because I interned at the division. I was one of the first interns, as a matter of fact. I was introduced to the division in 2005 during Hurricane Wilma. Rob McDaniel took me under his wing, much like he's done with a lot of y'all. I've heard lots of good things with your program, but I was one of the first interns, if not the first interns that came on board. But I'm not going to talk about myself yet. I want to show a video and this is kind of why I got into emergency management. And this video, you want to hear some stuff that's kind of touching about the Blue Lagoon area, Grand Lagoon area rather, which deals with the hurricane response into Hurricane Ivan as to the reason I got into this business. So you'll hear some 911 dispatch calls coming in. They're going to talk about the devastation, and this is essentially the storm I lived through and in the Pensacola area. So we'll play this video if you would.
I got a call from my sister who is there in Pensacola. They did not get evacuated. She's in a trailer park. Their trailer has just been cut in half. She's screaming. She wants to leave.
Pensacola 911.
Yeah, I need to find out if the eye has passed yet. We are up to our waist in water.
Where are you at, ma'am?
We are in, I'm trying to think, Grand Lagoon. We're south of South Beach.
Pensacola 911, what is your emergency?
Something flew in my window. It's busted my window open and my window, my room is down.
I'm sorry?
A tree or something busted through my bedroom window.
Pensacola 911.
I don't know. We're getting flooded really bad. Up to our here in water.
Where are you?
We're over in Grand Lagoon.
He's in his house and he's waist deep. It's him and his dog and they can't get out. Man, we don't have anybody available to go down there. And he's waist deep in water?
Yes.
In every room?
In every room. It's coming under the house.
And he can't get out. He went to go outside to get in the truck. But his house is up off the ground. It's on block, like cinder blocks or something. And it's worse outside. Yeah, we don't have any officers on the street right now. Okay. If there's a list or anything, when this is over, they could go check or something. Waist deep. Oh my God. Was about 5 inches about 10 minutes ago. It's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
I told him go to the washer and dryer, refrigerator, and next is going to be his roof.
Okay, well, they did try to evacuate everything that was down below Garden Street. Hold on just a moment.
Oh my God.
Pensacola 911. Yes, ma'am. I'm not sure if there's anything that you can do or anything, but we're staying next door to a 90-year-old woman, and her roof just flew off of her house, and we know that she's in that house. Right now, we can't even respond to her. Hopefully, she's in a strong part of the house. There's nothing we can do. Hello? Pensacola 911.
Yes, ma'am. I just needed to know who I need to report that, we are in waist deep water in our home and my father is in a wheelchair. And is there any way that you guys can put us on a list to have somebody come out as soon as the storm is over and come and get them?
I'm here. What's going on?
My mother didn't bring it.
Okay, stay on the phone. Do not hang up.
Oh, God, this storm is so damn.
The people living in the panhandle of Florida knew it was coming. They had been through it many times before, or at least they thought they had. They all took cover, yet nothing could prepare them for what was about to occur, and for what would become the fourth worst natural disaster in U.S. history. On Thursday, September 16th, 2004, at 2 a.m., the eye of Hurricane Ivan made landfall at Gulf Shores, Alabama. with its highest winds of 140 miles per hour occurring over northwest Florida. Along with high winds and more than 100 tornadoes came an unprecedented 13-foot storm surge. A surge so powerful it lifted 220-ton sections of an interstate bridge off their foundation. Within hours of the hurricane making landfall, the 400,000 residents of northwest Florida were in total disbelief. Approximately 9,000 of the 155,000 homes had been destroyed. 15,000 had received major damage, 140,000 had received some damage, and more than 50,000 people were displaced from their homes. The main wastewater treatment plant was flooded, causing 12 million gallons of raw sewage to spill throughout the streets of downtown Pensacola. 90% of the area was left without power, and tens of thousands of people had no running water. With the Pensacola Regional Airport closed due to damage, and with all major bridges into northwest Florida inoperable, there was virtually no way in or out of the area. People began standing in lines for hours for any assistance they could get. A federal disaster was immediately declared, with the severity of the situation being such that President Bush made a personal visit. The Federal Emergency Management Agency and the Florida National Guard began airlifting in water, ice, and food, including more than 70,000 MREs. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers distributed more than 120,000 blue tarps to give people a temporary means of keeping their roofs from leaking. Of the 4 hurricanes to hit Florida in 2004, Hurricane Ivan was by far the worst. As stated by Alan Bentz, the Florida Speaker of the House, there is no close second. I've seen my share of hurricanes come through, but nothing like this. It's unbelievable what Ivan did to you. Greg Posey of Mountain Home, Arkansas, and a member of the Church of Christ Disaster Relief Team summed it up best. People outside of this area are not aware how bad it is. I've traveled to third world countries. This looks like a nuclear bomb went off in a third world country. So much damage occurred to the infrastructure and business community that 2 months after the hurricane, unemployment claims were still 8 times higher than average. And even today, more than 10,000 families do not have the financial means, government assistance, or insurance to repair their homes. This is why Rebuild Northwest Florida was formed. And this is why we need your help.
But one of the things that was touching for me was having that experience as Hurricane Ivan came through in the middle of the night, not knowing what to expect. You know, the feeling of the roof peeling off the top of the house to the water coming down the sides of the walls. Many of you probably lived in Florida, may have gone through something similar to that. But I can tell you, for me, it was one of the reasons why I dedicated my life to emergency management, and it kind of all fell in by accident. I was going and studying at University of West Florida. I was working at what they called a private yacht club. It was a marina at the time, and of course, Hurricane Ivan washed all that away. Because of Hurricane Ivan, I lost my job. My apartment was impacted. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, had a home over at Pensacola Beach that was washed away. She wasn't able to get to her home for about 3 weeks. And basically, I stayed and we bartered with family and friends, you know, to get resources. I was one of the people that you saw getting ice there with the National Guard. I was working with my locals and my friends as a whole community to essentially survive. People's freezers were going without power. We were out power 2 weeks. You were using your local community pool as a resource for water to flush toilets, things like that. You kind of came together. It was a hell of a hurricane party, I'll say that much, because I mean, my wife brought plenty of beer and meat. She was the wise one, and she evacuated. I guess understand the liability, and she being an attorney understood the significance of her getting out of town. I didn't. And my mother, as the storm was starting to impact us, said we should have evacuated, and it was a little too late at that time. So I commend people like you that have an interest, whether you go into the emergency management field or you just want to pursue a few classes in emergency management. It certainly has been a home for me, and it's been the best thing I could have ever done, because in many ways, I've been able to give back to those that did so much for me. I ended up transferring here in '04, in December of '04. My wife had found a few courses, Foundations in Emergency Management. She said this would be a pretty cool course. Happened to be under Audrey and Janet Dealing at the time, and took a few courses with them and fell in love with it, and then went on to get my master's here in emergency management, get the certificate as well, and took courses with Rob and Dave as they got their master's, as a matter of fact, and kind of grew with them. But I will tell you, in emergency management, it's about giving back to others. It's been very rewarding to me to be able to have a career like this, and then see not only what I can do, but to see the work that the time and the work that I'll do to provide results for our community. You'll see, whether it's the private sector, the local government, or the state side, you'll see different facets of emergency management. You'll see different personalities. But at the end of the day, working together to have one mission, and that's preservation of property and life safety, is really it's a very rewarding experience. Over the years after interning with the division, I was mentored under Craig Fugate, now the FEMA administrator. He always stopped me in the hallways and reminded me wanted to ask me what the mission statement was, what the vision was, how many emergency support functions we have. I did hurricane evacuation planning. He wanted to know all the evacuation clearance times. I could tell you there was one time when Hurricane Ike was approaching our state and I forgot my name because Governor Charlie Crist walked up to me and introduced himself and shook his hand and wanted to get on the conference call, and I forgot my name. I was so starstruck. I tend to get really starstruck with people for some reason. My wife laughs. Local meteorologists, local news media, I get starstruck with them, but we just saw Usher on the plane to New York about 6 months ago, and I was like, oh, that's Usher, okay. But in any event, so yeah, I forgot my name, but I remembered it luckily. But I called him Charlie instead of Governor Crist, and Craig Fugate kindly reminded me that after I left that meeting that I would call him Governor Crist, and I was not on a first name basis with Charlie Crist ever, and that it would be tattooed across my forearm if I did not learn Governor Crist in the future. So there's little things like that, very stressful experiences that you'll have in your field, but you learn, and I will say in emergency management, while it used to be trial by fire, I will tell you that the folks I've worked with and that I've mentored, it's not trial by fire in my business. Even people in different sections, whether you're state, local, private, if you're affiliated with this chapter, I am a CEM. I went through and got my certification in emergency management through the IAM chapter. Y'all call it IAM, I call it IAM. But I also have the FEPA one as well, but the Florida Emergency Preparedness Association one, which you may or may not be affiliated with. But those are things that you can do. There's a drive now. There's a lot of interest in your career that there wasn't there when I was interested in this field 10 years ago. And as Audrey would say, emergency management is sexy. And you're seeing what used to be fire rescue and law enforcement who used to run emergency management at the local, state, and federal levels. You're seeing folks that have been trained at the university level, who've been mentored like yourselves, that are coming up and leading key agencies, whether it is the private, local, or state sectors. People want people like yourselves that have gone through and studied emergency management at the collegiate level. And it's no longer this good old boy system where, a fireman and I, we had a few beers together one night and I decided he was going to be the next fire chief at the county. It's all about what you bring to the table, your career. It is about who you know. I will say that still to a certain degree, but there's a different focus now than what there ever has been now on your academic-based background than what there used to be. And you're seeing now the baby boomers transition out, which is good for me because I'm looking to move up. But at the same time, it'd be good for you because you're moving into spots that I'm moving out of. You won't get rich in emergency management unless you go in the private sector. But I will tell you, there's something about going and taking care of others and doing what we do and what I do that is rewarding more than any money can provide. Hurricane Ivan touched me. It impacted my life. It's still to this day. It's very hard to watch that video. We were 11th anniversary, September the 16th it was. And they're still friends of mine that we lived through that storm together, and we're like brothers and sisters. And if you go through a disaster and you respond to a disaster, even at the state, local, private levels, it's something you bond. You go through very stressful experiences together, but it brings you together. And these people that I work with throughout the state, throughout the country, it's like a family. I was lucky enough, I got a call last August in the middle of the night from our CERT chief, and the CERT chief said, it was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and as emergency managers, you learn that you always have your phone by your side. You sleep with it whether or not you're on call or not, you're always on call. And whether or not you take vacations, get married or whatever, you're still on call. I got a call that I needed to deploy to Hawaii. And of course, I thought I was sleeping. I said, sir, he goes, I need somebody to deploy to Hawaii. He's got evacuation experience and operations experience. Hawaii is about to be impacted by 2 hurricanes. I need you to be there within 24 hours. Can you accept this mission? I'm like, yes, sir. I mean, so at the time I had one of our deputy logistics chiefs staying with us, and he happened to be dog sitting for me. My wife and I were both traveling. It just so happened I was at the house and he was staying here. He comes out and he's got his boxer shorts on. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and he looks at me and he says, what are you doing watching the Weather Channel at 3 o'clock in the morning? And I turned it to, I was watching the storms in the Pacific. You know, we were always watching storms on the Atlantic. And I felt so small-minded because I could care less, or was not even monitoring what was going on in the Pacific, because that's not geared to what I'm looking at on the East Coast. And there was 2 hurricanes heading towards Hawaii. And I was supposed to fly between the 2 of them and land. So needless to say, I deployed to Hawaii. I supported operations there. Of course, I was talking to chatter on Facebook quite a bit as en route, and I was monitoring as much information as I could through social media, through my connections throughout the emergency management. But one of the things that somebody from Miami texted me or through Facebook messaged me and said, hey, Ashley, slow your roll. When you get there, it's a different environment. They're on island time, and you're not going to do operations how you do it here in Florida. And I went back to him and I said, well, what are you talking about, man? We got to get there. We got to meet the need. We got resources to deploy. There's people that are impacted by this storm, and another storm's coming in. He said, slow your roll, slow your roll. When you get there, you're there to support them. So here's a white, cornbread, big white boy coming into Hawaii, and the locals are kind of looking up at me like, who in the heck just walked into our emergency operations center, which is in a bunker in a inactive volcano rather. So I walk into a volcano, that's enough to freak you out. And then you've got another hurricane about to make landfall. So it's an old school bunker. I was taken back by that, but all the natives just were kind of intimidated by me. So I had to immediately kind of just try to work with them and try to put Southern charm into the disaster mix, if you can imagine that, as opposed to saying, hey, this is how we're going to run operations, how can I support you, and then understanding really what their needs are, because the locals are really too proud to ask for help. So we went there with Mississippi, California, and one from Florida, and I happened to be the one from Florida. And so initially the folks from Mississippi had to pull them aside because they were trying to strong arm them. They had been impacted by Katrina, and Florida had supported Mississippi. They had a lot of lessons learned, so they kind of wanted to go in there and use the good old boy tactic. But we pulled back on that. California had a different way of running things. And it ended up being a successful mission. The storm didn't really impact us as much as we thought we were going to be impacted. But I was on the phone with Hawaii just 3 weeks ago as they had 2 more storms heading their way, and they were calling me and asking me for support and guidance over the phone, telling me to pack my bags. Of course, I was ready to go, but it didn't happen. But those relationships, and in fact, I'll be at the NEMA conference next week, depending on what this low pressure system does off the Yucatan we're watching. But those are folks and family that I'll see at NEMA, or I'll see at a conference or something like that. And it's like brothers or sisters. You bond together, you work together. We responded to that disaster together. And so now the natives are just as happy to know me and see me. You know, they remember my birthday. I recently was promoted to chief of operations. You know, they sent me letters and sent me coffee from Hawaii, and so it's like a family. So if you go in this field, you'll have the chance to experience that. but at the same time, understand that it's not everybody gets to go to Hawaii. I think my wife was taking depositions that day, and I couldn't wait to text her. Of course, you can't sleep because you're going to Hawaii. And I was texting her. I said, "Hey, look, I'm going to Hawaii." And she goes, well, I didn't text her. I was going to go to Hawaii. She said, I waited till she got up at 6, and she said, "Where are you going?" And she said, "Mississippi or Alabama?" And I said, "No, I'm going somewhere else." Guess again. And so after a few guesses, she's like, "Where are you going?" I said, "Hawaii." And needless to say, she wasn't as happy about it as I was. But I think Hawaii beats Alabama, Mississippi any day. But everybody gives me a hard time about that. But I think I'm one of the few that got the chance from Florida to go on that deployment. But I will say, it's awesome to have that experience. Closely tied to the North Carolina folks, all the way up to the East Coast with projects I work on. You collaborate with other states on different projects. I happen to see over air operations for the state of Florida, and I oversee tactical teams that deploy throughout the state and support operations. I have about 200 people that will deploy on my command, whether it's fire rescue, law enforcement, emergency management, health, and we have what they call the All Hazards IMT concept that I brought to Florida. And I can talk to you about all day. We have a presentation solely on that. But that's kind of one of the things that's big to me, and bringing all hazards incident management teams, all disciplines together to respond together. And it's a new concept to Florida. And so when you think about it, having those resources readily available, coming together and working together, because a lot of times law enforcement doesn't talk to fire rescue and vice versa. And now I have them as teams that will deploy together and exercise together. But in any event, I'd like to answer any questions and learn more about you possibly, and if there's things I can address specifically about your interest in emergency management, what you'd like to know more about why I'm in emergency management, my interest in studies here, I'll be glad to entertain any questions that you may have. Well, they all should intern for me.
There's only so many spots as well.
I'm biased because I'm an operations geek. I like the excitement of being there in the heat of things and seeing what's going on and getting a feel for. I know it's twisted, but what we do is kind of twisted. I mean, if you get excited about disasters, let's face it, it is what it is. But there is obviously you got preparedness, which is a lot of focus on writing plans. Yay, I've done that. But hey, if that's interesting, you're writing plans, evacuations plans, debris management plans, radiological emergency preparedness plans. Then you have your response bureau, which is, I'll talk more about that. Then you have mitigation, which is all about, whether you have flood plan management, if you're dealing with anything mitigating factors of disaster response, whether it's shelter plans, whether it's your safe houses, whatever it may be. But then you've got your recovery, which deals a lot with debris, of course, coming in. They take care of getting funding for the state in the event the state's impacted, and how can we, provide resources for folks long term. Response is where the heat is where I'm at, is where I love to be. You have operations, you have logistics, you have infrastructure. I have the State Watch Office, which I oversee, which is basically very similar to like a 911 dispatch center, which you get calls in for hazmat spills, you get calls in for railroad incidents, mass fatalities, white powder incidents, airplane crashes, and that's basically where the heat of everything goes on. Now, a lot of times that's for some folks, they can be in there and they can work in that kind of environment day in and day out, and others can't. But it's a good place that I believe, and I would think Rob would agree, being operationally minded like I am, that kind of well rounds you for it, because you get to see all aspects of emergency response. And then you can take that and go into a different bureau. But I'm an operations geek. I like the excitement. I like the adrenaline rush I get from a disaster. It's an event. It's whatever it may be. To walk into that emergency operations center during Hurricane Wilma in 2005 and see all those people working together, bless you, to see all those people working together and how they're going to respond and take care of people and save lives, protect property is pretty awesome. But what we have in the other bureaus is those folks come in and they transition into the EOC role. I'm always in the EOC role. And that's, I would just advise you to review the website, look at different programs out there that you might be interested in. If you have hurricane evacuation planning that you're interested in, I did that at one time. I did radiological emergency preparedness too. I was not really savvy with the nuclear power plants, nor did I like the chemistry side of things, but it was something I started off at doing. And then evacuation planning was pretty cool. It was a new plan that was written for the state of Florida. And then I did the watch office, and I did actually do some work for Department of Transportation for debris removal and evacuation planning as well. So there'll be different agencies that you can work for. But I will tell you that if you ever get in a spot, especially at DEM, where you're just holding down a spot, and I told this to the interns, you come and talk to the intern coordinator, you come and talk to me, because you're not there to push paper, you're there to be a part of the team just as much as anybody else. And I was one of those folks that had to sit in ESF 5, Emergency Support Function 5 room, and just push paper all day. And that's not what we want from you. We want you to get the experience that I would get. My intern, Ryan Lackey, right now is overseeing air operations, and the poor boy is punished just about every day he comes in there, because I'm not punished, but he's learning things, and he's driven, and he's meeting folks with Silver Air Patrol, he's meeting people with FAA, he's making connections with our local FWC resources. That Air Boss, we had a meeting today. I want you to have those same experiences that I wasn't able to have, that now and then through our intern program I think you will have. And so you're brought in as the future leaders of the agency, as opposed to someone in the past looking at you and saying, you're too young, your time is insignificant, and you'll never be at our level. Now it's, you will be our replacement, and we will invest time in you. You will take trainings, you will travel to conferences, you will have that experience here. So it's just a matter of whether or not you push yourself. I mean, there's going to be times where you obviously feel intimidated by others, but I think that as you grow and you learn the role, there's a lot that you can do within emergency management. And I think it's also important to understand, if you get in a bureau like preparedness and you don't necessarily like that fit, you can always go to another bureau. I mean, we can work with our intern coordinator and make that happen. Because ultimately, we want to make you happy and want your experience to be good. Good question. I hope I answered it. Yes, ma'am.
Are you going to be on any of the NEMA subcommittees or workshop panels?
That's a good question. I will, if the low pressure system off of Yucatan doesn't call me back, I will be there with the EMAC group. I'm extremely interested in mutual aid, because mutual aid provides it's a solid mechanism for the state of Florida or any state to support other states, and at their cost. That's why when I deployed out to Hawaii, I deployed out on the EMAC mission. And one of the things that I'm doing now with my incident management teams, the all hazards incident management teams, is utilizing my contacts with other states, because once they need an incident management team to stand up, whether it's out Midwest with the wildfires, or it's out for flooding events that we've got going on throughout the country, then I can utilize EMAC to deploy these teams out. And so I think that'll be discussed throughout the NEMA presentation. And then at the NEMA mid-year in Alexandria, Virginia, I think it will be this year, this 2016, I'll be briefing on the incident management team program that I received for Florida. So if you can make that, I think that'd be awesome. But no, I'm not sitting there. I'll be in the crowd. If there's anything that's specific to incident management teams, there's a possibility I might be asked to come up and speak. But a good question, yeah. So are you attending as well, or no?
Yes, a few of us are.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I would say NEMA's great to be a part of as well. I just recently got to attend the mid-year, and then went to the one of the workshops in Minnesota. So it's a great organization to be a part of as well. You're seeing a lot of drive now, and a lot of folks would say the old school emergency managers were more focused on like Florida Emergency Preparedness Association, and now you're seeing this drive for like the International Association of Emergency Managers, and then of course the National Emergency Management Association. More of the academic-based groups that study the emergency response and preparedness. There's a lot more interest in that now. The Governor's Hurricane Conference, great conference, a lot of connections you can make there locally. But after a few of those, okay, I'm now looking to go on the national level. And I think any experience you can get with attending any of those national conferences, there's so many connections. There's so much you can learn from other states' best practices. Case in point, avian influenza, how we're going to manage that. There's lessons learned from the Midwest that I'm working with right now how do they manage that epidemic up there in the Midwest? And I'm going to a chicken farm tomorrow in Suwannee County to just prepare for what we could see down here when the birds migrate down here to Florida. So we get the snowbirds and we get the avian flu. Yes, ma'am.
So you talked about all the different things you've done over your career. Would you say that you just said yes to every opportunity, or did you have an idea from the beginning of exactly what you wanted to do? Because I know a lot of us are looking at doing different internships or different things. So
An emergency.
what guided you?
Yeah, what guided me? I think it just, I was by interest. I think where I got into, and I will say, in emergency management, at least when I started, 9 years ago, it'll be October, but then I interned at the end of 05, going into 06, so almost 10 years. It was about who you knew, not what you knew. And I was going to class with Farrah Gosford, who is actually on your Grads Done Good website, I think, and she's a consultant now for IEM, and she took me under her wing in the radiological emergency preparedness section for the nuclear power plants. We have 3 in the state of Florida, and the 4th one we work with in Dothan, Alabama. And I was a fish out of water. I didn't know what I was doing with REP. I did study it. I did understand a little bit about the evacuation side of things, but when they started getting in there and discussing the specifics of radiological emergency preparedness, I just wasn't fit for me. So there I learned more about evacuations, and then a position became available under hurricane evacuation planning. So it was all kind of trial by error. So I will tell you, you'll find your niche. It might take you some time, but then you might find it immediately. It just really depends on what your studies are. And I think the diverse program that Florida State offers now, with your UAS program that you have now, I did some of the terrorism-based courses, but there's more courses offered here now. I think that will give you a better foundation to see where your niche is. But I would encourage you through your internship program, if you do intern, to learn more about different bureaus and meet with those folks. And then it never hurts to go and sit in someone's office and say, hey, what do you do? Somebody like me, I'll spend as much time with you, grab a bite to eat, whatever. And why do you feel like this is good for you? And I'm thinking about learning more about this program. What are your thoughts? What's the inside thing? Because you're now seeing folks that have interned, graduated either through the undergrad, graduate levels at DEM, and they want to mentor you. And I didn't have that there. So you will have people there at the division or other agencies that will help you. I can only speak specifically to DEM, but I knew when I got into operations, it just hit home for me. It was all the excitement. It was where I got to see things, there was times where I walked into the watch office and I walked out and I thought I'd been into a full day activation and I just wanted to go home and drink a beer. But it was pretty stressful. But I knew I lived for that, and I still do. Yes, ma'am.
I'm highly interested in UAS.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that's one of the next big topics in CERT, or what kind of topics and projects are you guys talking about this year?
Great question. We actually met with, I emailed FAA today to get an understanding as to what state plans are focused on UAS, because what we're dealing with right now, as you can imagine, is how can we control UAS devices and comms capabilities, responsibilities of these different devices that are going to go up and do their own recon when there is an event. And it's scary to think about what they could do, but at the same time, how can we utilize that resource? We're of the old school now where we're still trying to transition into understanding what their capabilities are, but there's so many state laws out there that mandate, regulate what we can do, that it's going to be problematic for us, that we're going to have to go up and go through the FAA to come back down to be able to deploy that resource. So to your question, I think there is going to be a big interest and drive towards UAS, and I believe to the point where we're going to have to create positions to manage it. I'm currently working right now to input into our air operations guide, basically, if you will, a page, a layout of how we would manage that resource if it was available. Currently, we have some fixed wing rotary ring throughout the state, and then we have UAS that's there through FWC, and then through I believe Department of Transportation has some resources as well. And then Army Corps of Engineers has a device as well. But it's going to be interesting. We're already seeing video coming back to us when there's an event overseas, and that capability itself is going to speak volumes because it can do more than anything than what we've ever seen before. Katrina, they faced a lot of issues. It was still, you've seen that UAS has been around for years, but it's now become more of a sexy topic, to the point where in Katrina they were flying helicopters with UAS devices mounted to the bottom of helicopters, basically duct taped, because they couldn't fly a UAS device, but they could fly a helicopter. So what they did is they just duct taped that UAS device to the bottom of that helicopter and flew that same route. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, I was told that story last week, so I couldn't believe it. And this guy it was in the private sector. You're seeing a lot of folks in the private sector trying to come in and meet with us and try to say, hey, how can we provide your resources? How can we support you for an event? Being a state entity, we've got to be careful with that. They're a partner just as much as anything, but at the same time, we got to be careful, with that. But there's a lot of interest in it. I've got an excellent presentation I can give to you from FAA if you'd like to look at it. I share it with you. I'll share it with Alec. You can share it with the team. I don't think it's sensitive. God forbid if it is. But I met with two-star general in Panama City at one of their military facilities there, and they had brought all states in from FEMA Region 4, and their focus was specifically on how to manage the capabilities of UAS. And there's a lot of concerns out there, I'll tell you that much. But that's the way it is. I mean, until it's known, until we're educated on how to manage it, we don't know what we're going to do. But I think when you start looking at folks that are flying these devices and flying them into your backyard, looking at, in your windows, who controls that airspace and how do we manage that? So there's a lot of work ahead of us. But long and short, there's going to be a lot of interest in that in the future. Yes, ma'am.
When you were in Hawaii, what would you say was besides the whole culture side, so you kind of the big boss, what was the other major thing that in terms of how they handle operations there as you're used to handle operations over here?
So what was the difference? Let me repeat your question to make sure I understood. So how was the difference in how we managed operations, and what aside from that, what was the other difference in how we managed it? I think because of the lack of understanding of hurricanes and their impacts. Over there, they have tsunamis, earthquakes, those kind of things that take place on a daily basis. But, it's been many, many years since they've been impacted by a hurricane or even the threat of a hurricane. And so that itself was an issue to work through. Also, their islands, some of their homes are built out of plywood. They're not prepared for any kind of storms like that, and so also just going into their, it was like going to another country, if you will. And I was proud to be there, but a lot of folks didn't really want me there. And so I just had to explain that I was there to support them. We're the state, we're the locals, and we're here to support you. We're not here to take over command and control. We're here to support you. Let me know what you need. And then eventually I was able to gain their trust. So that was a struggle. That's a struggle even in the state of Florida. The locals in many ways have troubles with the state coming in. Much like the locals just feel like we're going to come in and take over command and control. We're there to support them, much like the feds are there to support us. In many ways, it's kind of a frustrating rippling effect. The locals love to hate the state, but they want our funding and they want our support, and we love to hate the feds, but we want their support and we want their funding. So that's kind of one of the things in how it works out. But I would say overall, the experience I had in Hawaii, the people I ended up leaving were like family in the end, still are. I mean, they were bringing me their native foods, which, oh God, I just ate and ate and ate. And I think after they warmed up to me and understood what I was there to do and educate them and talk to them about how we did things in Florida and how we could better prepare the natives and how we could prepare the state of Hawaii, it was like we all came together, and I still talk to them about how we can help. And I think you'll see through EMAC a virtual EMAC component in the future where we are supporting people virtually. That is another future in emergency management where there is a sense and a drive now where if I can take an IT person that can support remotely, IT folks, nothing against, I hope none of you all are IT folks, but I'd love to be up all night anyway. If you're basically on a different time zone, you can adapt and help those folks remotely. If I have you as a GIS mapper, or if I have you as a planner who's putting out situation reports and putting out situational awareness, depending on the severity of the event, I can have you do that remotely. So you're going to see some of that stuff that would have cost you thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars to deploy that resource over to support you, that's supporting you remotely. So virtual EMAC is something that you'll hear discussions at the EMAC table about. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Besides an internship, is there any way a student can become experienced with the stress and pace of an activated EOC?
Absolutely. I would recommend that when they come in, Tanya would have to help me with this, and she would have to be, if she is not an intern with the division, obviously we have to be careful with bringing folks into an EOC operations during an activation. Things are very sensitive. A lot of times we don't even allow the media in. We have a special section for the media if you've gone through and seen our EOC. So you would have to have the right credentials. You'd have to be invited in by Tanya more than likely, or Rob. I was brought in by Rob. So I could see, maybe one or two, maybe three of you coming in at a time and getting that feel. But right now I'd recommend for like an exercise. We have statewide hurricane exercise every May, and then we have quarterly nuclear power plant drills. And you can see the operation itself. And then that way, there's not so many eyes on you as to what you're doing there, and you're kind of getting lost in the clutter. I could pull aside and say, hey, look, this is what this branch is doing, what this emergency support function is doing. This is how they're working this mission, and this is how we're tackling it. If there's an activation, I'm probably going to have 20 people around me and 100 different questions, and I won't be able to spend the time with you. Others might have that chance to spend time with you, like Rob could show you, but I would recommend if there is an activation. We did bring in folks from NC State that wanted to learn more about it for Tropical Storm Erica that we thought was going to impact Florida. We did bring in folks from NC State that wanted to see how behavior analysis and studies of people that were evacuating, if they evacuated. So we're open to that. I think Tanya might have met some of those folks. They're actually from Delaware, but one of them studied at NC State. I gave her a hard time because, we always beat up on NC State, especially in football. So she was a Wolfpack girl, but she had to accept she was going to be a Seminole before she was here. So, but good question. I mean, anytime you can get that experience, and some of the local EOCs are pretty receptive to having folks come in as well, and I can work with you on that as well. Any questions? Any more questions? Anything I can address as far as, what are y'all studying emergency management here, pretty much? And are y'all part of the IAM or IAM chapter? How have you felt like that chapter has been helpful for you? And you're the president, so you're going to say yes. But has it been something that's been helpful, lucrative, beneficial? Certainly with something like this, I would hope so. Having presentations like this to learn about others. Hate to say it, oh God, 10 years ago they didn't have anything like this for me here. So anyway. I hope that in any way that you'll feel like you can contact Alex, Tanya, and reach out to me through them if you'd like, but I'm always open to address questions afterwards. If you decide to go into emergency management, there's always ways to work with people. I know people across the country, whether it is the private, state, or federal sectors, that I can work with and try to help you make those connections. I'm very proud to be here with you. I'm very proud to be the first one to have the chance to speak at this. It's an honor. You've got another person that's going to be speaking next week, Alex, who's a big chief within the recovery within FEMA. He was brought up with Craig Fugate to receive the recovery phase for FEMA, and he's going to be a good speaker for you all. And I'll see him next week as well as Fugate at NEMA. So if I see any of y'all at NEMA and y'all want to get a photo shot with Craig Fugate, I'll have to pull you aside. He's a big gator. So I have to see past that, and he'll probably drill me in front of you. So that's always fun. Poor Audrey and Rob used to always feel sorry for me because I would come like a scaredy cat half the time because I was getting drilled all the time. And so I actually told Craig one time, I said, I didn't really like you that much. When he went to FEMA and he came back a couple of years ago, I said, I really didn't like you all that much. And he goes, well, you're a smart kid, you need to be tested. And I was like, well, thanks. So now what I do with my interns is I ask them what the mission statement is, I ask them what the ESFs are, but I don't do it to the extent he does. I had to travel with him down to South Florida a few times, and the guy just drilled me the whole time. And I ended up getting, I'll tell you one more story. I enjoy telling stories. I was getting on a plane, and Craig was ahead of me, and this is before he went to FEMA. And he was probably, I was flying from a nuclear power plant drill out of South Florida up to North Florida, and he said, I see ahead of me, there's like 3 or 4 people ahead of me, and see Craig just kind of just doing his little walk. He's kind of a bigger guy, and he kind of hobbles along. And I'm like, damn, that's Craig Fugate, and he's getting on the same damn plane that I'm getting on. And I was like 25, 26 years old, and I'm looking at this damn plane, I'm thinking, it's a small commuter plane, it's fine in Tallahassee International, which it was not then. But in any event, I don't think the planes were any different in size, regardless of whether or not it's an international airport or not. But I thought I could do one or two different things. I can go say hello to him, or I can just chill back and just not say anything to this guy. So I swallowed my pride, and I walked up a few people, kind of skipped a few people in line if I could. You know, it was one of those, like I said, commuter planes, and people were just kind of messing around with luggage as they got on the plane. And I walked up and I said, Mr. Fugate, Mr. Fugate. And he looks and he goes, what are you doing here? And I said, well, sir, I was just at a task force meeting for a nuclear power plant drill. And he goes, oh, okay. So we walk onto the plane, we get on the plane, and I'm thinking, oh God, if I have to sit beside this guy for just like a short 45 minutes, it's going to seem like days. So he's getting on the plane, and there's a few folks ahead of him that are struggling. You know, obviously being the big plane it was, being sarcastic, you know, you have A, B, and C. And there was folks that were troubled by whether or not which was A, B, or C. And so he goes, that's A, that's B, that's C, sit down, to the people in front of us. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like my director. And then he turns around and he goes, Davis, what's the mission statement? And I'm like, the Assured Florida is prepared to respond, recover, and mitigate against disaster, sir. And he goes, I start asking you harder questions. Sits down on the plane, and then luckily he was several behind me, but I was turning around, and I was so nervous that he was just going to get stuck sitting beside me, but he was behind me, and I would look at him, and I could tell he was like totally just snoozing. He was just sleeping, and we hit some pretty nasty weather as we came into Tallahassee. So as we landed in Tallahassee, I mean, it's just nasty severe weather coming through. And at the time, we were between vehicles. We had one, and my wife had mine. And so she picks me up, and I didn't have to go pay for parking, so I didn't have to go out in long-term parking. So she picks me up underneath the terminal there. And I see Craig behind me, and he's clearly sees the bad rain, and he was notorious for kayaking and having a Nissan SUV and having those 2 kayaks on top of it. And you always saw it anywhere in Tallahassee if you saw it, that the vehicle was bright yellow kayaks. And I saw it, and it was very far away. And so I get in the car with Jennifer, and I said, Craig's in there. And she goes, you want to get him? I'm like, not really. And she was like, okay. So we drove off, and I'm like, go back. We got to go get him. So I go in there, you know, I put my briefcase in the car, and I walk in, and he's about to open up his computer and look at the Weather Channel and see, or look at the National Weather Service and see what the forecast is. And I'm like, Mr. Fugate. And then he goes, I said, I'll get you a ride to your car, sir. And he goes, okay. I was just going to look at the Weather Service, puts his laptop in his thing and puts it in his bag and comes and gets in the car. And I'm like, I think we were just dating or maybe engaged at the time. I said, this is my fiance, Jennifer. He goes, hello. I was like, she practiced law here in Tallahassee? He goes, that's great. I mean, I'm trying to do everything I can to make conversation with him. And I'm like, so we take him to his car, open up the door, and he goes, you don't go anywhere, you're fine. And he goes, people I don't like call me Mr. Fugate, and the media calls me Mr. Fugate. You call me Craig. And he stuck his hand out and shook his hand. And I was like, oh, God. And then it was just hell from there on. It was still Craig, but I was drilled and drilled and drilled. And it was interesting. It was kind of interesting how things come full circle. Audrey says I have daddy problems or something. I don't know what she meant by that, but whatever. Because I sent her a text or a picture in March that of Craig and I together, because I was at this conference. People were just circling them at NEMA, the mid-year at NEMA, and you'll see contractors if you go to it. You'll see people that are just county, state directors are just circled around Craig, and he has his whole entourage. I let them alone. I was just like, whatever. And apparently, I was talking to one of our former interns, and Craig beelined it for me from what one of my friends told me. And then he just came up to me and he goes, hey, how's the wife? How are things going for you? And wanted to talk to me about Florida operations. And I guess it made him feel good that he was just talking about Florida business, because I can't imagine the stresses that he must have at the national level and having to deal with things that he deals with on a day-to-day business and basically being the emergency manager of our country. And so I think it made him feel somewhat good to talk to someone. And I asked him some specific questions related to what issues I was working on with Florida and get that historical knowledge, because that historical knowledge and that experience that he's already had is so good for people like us that are in this profession. So you'll have experiences like that. Hopefully I won't be as hard on you as Craig was, but I might be. Any questions? I think that wraps it up for me. It was awesome. It was great, guys, to talk to y'all. Thank you.